Hey Liz, how are we looking on attendees coming in? Is it still going up?
Yes, indeed, still going up.
Okay.
I'll keep you posted.
Let's go ahead and if you could, let's mute everybody other than me so we can cut down on background noise. I can unmute myself if you have to do everybody in one swoop.
All right, it's calming down a little. I mean, people might join while you're doing the intro, but I think you could go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome to Friday, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today at our 47th annual and first virtual environmental congress. My name is Jennifer Coffey. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the executive director of ANJAC, the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, and it's a pleasure to have you all here with us virtually today. We will be tweeting from our account at ANJAC Tweets and using the hashtag EnviroCongress. So go ahead and add to that conversation if you're on Twitter and post about today's session and any questions that you have on future or past sessions using hashtag EnviroCongress on Twitter. A few housekeeping notes. We're usually in person, but we've got some new elements now that we're virtual. We are using the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. I'm sure most of us are familiar with Zoom now, but for those of you who don't use it maybe quite as frequently as I seem to be doing these days, if you scroll down the bottom of your screen, you should get a pop-up menu and you'll see a Q&A option. You can go ahead and type your questions in there for our speakers. We have a number of ANJAC staff on today, so they'll be monitoring the Q&A and collecting the questions into categories, and we'll pose them to the speakers at the time we've allotted for our questions and answers. So go ahead and post there and know that we'll catch it and get to your question later on. If you're having technical difficulty, I would suggest first using the Q&A option. If you've got questions about seeing the screen or not being able to hear somebody, and we can try to troubleshoot that for you in the Q&A. If you're having really massive technical problems with today's Congress, so let's just keep it to today's session and not your general IT needs, you can go ahead and call our Deputy Director, Liz Ritter, who's on today, and that's her cell phone. So we'll ask that you keep that private and just use that for today's session if you are having technical difficulties. I also want everybody to know that all of our sessions for Environmental Congress are being recorded, and they will be posted at a later date at ANJAC's YouTube channel. We will be sending links as they become available to all of those who are registered for the Environmental Congress. So if you don't catch something today or want to share it with other EC members, rest assured a link will be headed your way shortly. With that, I want to thank our sponsors of Environmental Congress. We have some great corporate stewards who are longtime sponsors of our Environmental Congress. As I said, we've been doing this for 47 years now. First time virtual, so first time for everything. We have some wonderful business sponsors and nonprofit sponsors, and of course, many of the foundations in New Jersey that support environmental work, support ANJAC's Environmental Congress, and make it possible for us to bring this program to you at a cost that we hope works for most, if not everybody. I also want to thank ANJAC staff. This is a little bit of what we look like these days, working from home in our dining rooms, our home offices, our kitchens. And it's a real pleasure to be able to continue to serve environmental commissions throughout the state of New Jersey. We know that you have faced enormous challenges this year, from trying to learn to meet virtually, struggles to meet in an era earlier this year when only emergency services were being dealt with. And at the same time, knowing that the issues of climate change, environmental justice, plastic pollution, flooding, clean water are certainly emergencies in and of themselves and need to be dealt with now. So with that, one of the great successes that we have had this year, and for those of you who have joined us with other sessions have heard me say this, is plastics. And so we are thrilled that because of you, because of the more than 130 ordinances that municipalities have passed, mostly led by environmental commission efforts, we are now at a point where we have the strongest plastic pollution reduction bill in the country sitting on Governor Murphy's desk waiting for his signature into law. He has 45 days from 2 weeks ago yesterday, so that math adds up to November 5th to sign the bill into law. And so we are in communication with the governor's office, urging him to sign it. They have pointed to the press statements he's given indicating his support for the bill, but as of yet, he has not signed it. And we do know that the plastics industry, and in particular, the polystyrene industry, is lobbying the governor's office very, very hard to encourage him not to sign it or to strike certain provisions from the bill, which would create a bit of a procedural nightmare for going back to the legislature. So what we want to do is encourage him to sign it. If you have not called him yet today, if you called him yesterday, feel free to call him again today at 609-292-6000 and encourage him to sign the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act into law. I know so many of you have worked incredibly hard on passing local ordinances, and we know that there are several dozen municipalities who are ready to enact ordinances if the state failed to take action. So we want to make sure that we get this over the line, that we pass this and we celebrate it as the strongest law in the nation, and that is because of you. We also want to encourage you to continue your community involvement, action, and activism through voting. We are partnered with the League of Women Voters this year, and so you will see these graphics and some other graphics on ANJAC's social media channels. Feel free to go to the League of Women Voters website for voter information. Voting in New Jersey, the registration deadline for voting in New Jersey is October 13th. That is next Tuesday. This is the last opportunity that we will come to you live before the voter registration deadline in New Jersey, October the 13th. If you have not registered yet, if you have friends or family who have not registered yet, there's no need to panic. You can now register online in New Jersey to vote. Go to nj.gov/state/elections or simply Google register to vote in New Jersey. It's a very simple, easy process. All registered voters in New Jersey will receive a ballot in the mail. There are instructions on that ballot how to complete it, and you can mail it in the U.S. Postal Service mailbox, or you can put it in a county ballot box. If you put your completed ballot in a county ballot box, you must use a county ballot box in the county in which you live and vote. So I live and vote in Mercer County. I can't mail my ballot from South Jersey when I go kayaking this weekend. I need to mail it, and I need to put it, sorry, not mail it, I need to put it in a ballot box in Mercer County or put it in any USPS, US Postal Service mailbox. I also want to ask you to consider making a donation to ANJAC. We know that times are tough, and we know that there are an enormous number of causes that you give to and that you support, and there are many people in need. But if you are able, we certainly appreciate your donations. Small dollar donations of $10, $15, $20 a month or more really keep us going and enable us to continue to bring programs like Environmental Congress, webinars on stormwater management, climate change, assistance on passing ordinances such as plastic pollution and moving them up the chain to get statewide legislation passed. So if you are able, we would appreciate your donation at anjac.org/donate. Thank you. With that, we are pleased to welcome a number of folks here today to talk about green infrastructure and stormwater management. Mike, we don't have your picture. Sorry about that. We've got Mike Pissarro from the Watershed Institute here as well. And we have a number of sessions coming up for you later this month. We are not here, we're obviously not together in person, so every Thursday evening and Friday at noon throughout October, we will be bringing you sessions. We want to make sure that we have a little bit of fun too. We usually have some fun at Environmental Congress with some networking, and we won't be supplying you with cookies and snacks this year, so it's BYO for that. We hope you'll join us next Thursday with your beverage of choice and your snacks of choice to hear from filmmaker Zach Morrison, listen to a little music, and hear from a very talented storyteller, Julie Pasquale. We hope that you will join us next Friday to hear from Judith Enck, who is responsible for reigniting my passion about plastic pollution when she called me about 6 years ago and asked if I would be interested in having a conversation about really getting to the source of pollution while continuing to inspire and support community cleanups, beach sweeps, park cleanups, but really trying to get to the source and wrangle with the plastics industry. So we're very excited to have Judith Enck speak to us next Friday about her movement beyond plastics. And then we'll be moving on the following week to talk about clean energy projects in New Jersey. So we'll have the Board of Public Utilities, our Environmental Commission representatives from Montclair, and the NJDEP. So we'll be talking about different levels of government and how they're approaching clean energy in a progressive way in New Jersey. And we're very excited to have Deputy Commissioner of the DEP, Olivia Glenn, with us on October 29th to talk about what is the strongest environmental justice legislation in the nation. New Jersey is really out in front and leading on environmental issues. So Olivia Glenn is going to speak to us about how the DEP is going to be interacting with that legislation to make better decisions for communities of color, low-income communities who suffer an overburden of pollution. And then on October 30th, which I don't have a slide for, we're going to have a session and a conversation about EC continuing operations during the pandemic, because we know that life is different for us now, and it will continue to be so for an undetermined amount of time. And we want to make sure that we continue to cultivate the kind of success and progress that we've seen in New Jersey so far. With that, one more opportunity for you to join us in November, just before Thanksgiving, where we'll be highlighting some New Jersey businesses that use clean water and really value clean water for their wine, their beer, and their liquor. So if you would like to join us for that, there's the registration link. These companies not only value clean water, use clean water, and are strong New Jersey companies, they also are implementing water conservation techniques, enhanced stormwater management techniques, and carbon sequestration techniques. So we're very excited to partner with these businesses and bring this 1-hour session to you on November 13th. So there's an opportunity to support ANJAC, support New Jersey businesses. Go ahead and register there. You'll see more information about that on our social media and through email. So with that, I want to thank you all for being here with us today. Go ahead and follow us at ANJAC Tweets, follow us on Facebook. If you have any general questions, you can go ahead and email info@anjac.org. And with that, I'd like to turn over today's program to Dr. Randy Rothmel on our staff, and she's going to walk us through the rest of our speakers for today. Thank you, Randy. You're muted, so it's hard to hear you.
You've got to do that. There we go.
There you go.
Sorry about that. I meant to hit that, but then the screen changed, so I was confused. Anyways, I don't normally go by the name of doctor, but I thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. Let me just pull up my screen if I can here. There we go. So I am Randy Rothmel. As Jen mentioned, I'm one of the South Jersey project directors, and we'll be moderating this session on requiring green infrastructure for stormwater management. I just want to remind everyone to please put your questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of our presentations of our 3 speakers today. I want to start, though, with introducing Matthew Cheek. He's the Director of Water Quality and Environmental Compliance with New Jersey American Water. Matt New Jersey American Water is a bronze sponsor of the session, the Environmental Congress, ANJAC style, ANJAC virtual style, and they have been a long supporter of ANJAC. They recently have made possible the a recent publication on stormwater management for municipalities. And I've had personal interaction with New Jersey American Water in that I was the past chair of the environmental committee in Mount Holly, and we applied for 2 environmental grants through New Jersey American Water, one of which paid for the installation of 2 rain gardens in town, and the second grant paid for converting 4 detention basins into naturalized meadows. And so I encourage any environmental commission who is in the New Jersey American Water area to look into their environmental grants, because they are extremely helpful. And with that, I will turn this over to Matt to give us a few words on what New Jersey American Water looks at, how they look at stormwater management and source water protection. Matt?
Thank you, Randy. Working on sharing my screen here, and we should be good to go in 1 second. There we go. Hopefully everyone's seeing my screen. Well, thank you, Randy. Definitely also very much appreciate the plug for environmental grants. Proud to say that we've reviewed so many interesting grants and unique projects, and that we only wish we could probably support more. So I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. Definitely thrilled to be here. Kicking off this session, my goal is to kind of show, from our perspective, the importance of effective stormwater management and what it really means when it comes to source water protection. Before I get into exactly why that's so important to us, I wanted to just kind of level set on the definition. What is source water protection? Well, obviously many of our reservoirs, rivers, lakes, and streams provide our source water for drinking water systems in the state of New Jersey. And stormwater runoff can bring pathogens, can bring contaminants, solids, all kinds of troubling and confounding things that we have to deal with at the treatment plant, making water more difficult to treat, more costly to treat at times. But there is a bright note. Effective stormwater management is not only a best management practice, but also in the real world, very much a cost savings for not only utilities like us, but our customers and other environmental groups to help solve some of the challenges that we face in the field. So why is source water protection so important? Well, I bucket these into 2 different areas. The first one, obviously, is public health, and that's the most important thing, and that's my day-to-day, my every minute. Source water protection is definitely a critical issue, and it's not an easy one for us to tackle. Water utilities, number 1, are protecting customers from being exposed to contaminants and other water quality challenges. Sometimes that can come from nutrients and algal blooms and other things like that. The second reason, or the second bucket, really is optimizing treatment. It costs a lot of money to treat a high volume of water, so protecting our source water from nutrient and contaminant impacts is certainly a key issue on our end and for our customers. 2 kind of impact things here I wanted to share with the group, and this is really what I wanted to get to. This is the why, right? From a public health perspective, more than half of the documented waterborne outbreaks since 1948 have followed extreme rainfall and runoff events. So that's a friendly picture of our little friend Cryptosporidium there. Cost to treat, obviously, this is just a generic treatment schematic, but at the end of the day, a sound source water protection program pays for itself time and time again, many times over. The cost to treat can range, and some of the defrayed costs that we don't have to treat can range from tens of millions of dollars in some documented circumstances to tens of billions of dollars, which is something that New York City has focused on. And I did include my references there in citations so folks can see it. So I hope that everyone enjoys the session and get ready to hear from people far smarter than me. And this is, hopefully I did apply a little bit of color to the why. So thank you all for being here. Thank you very much to ANJAC, and on behalf of New Jersey American Water, we're very proud to partner with you and further the work of ANJAC and your member and all the members in environmental stewardship experiences out in the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nat. And so we will now continue with our main part of our session, which is requiring green infrastructure for stormwater management. We're going to hear about the new stormwater management rules, in particular, requirement for major developments to utilize green infrastructure to meet groundwater recharge and stormwater runoff quality and quantity standards. And we also will hear about some issues in Hamilton regarding stormwater management and how they are looking at the potential of starting a stormwater utility. They will be conducting a feasibility study to potentially address those concerns. First, we're going to hear from Mike Pissarro, the policy director at the Watershed Institute. Prior to joining the Watershed Institute, Mike was a practicing attorney and ran his own law firm, concentrating on environmental work for citizen and environmental organizations before local land use boards, DEP, and in litigation. He was a lobbyist for the New Jersey Environmental Lobby, served on the Hopewell Valley Green Team, and was appointed member to the New Jersey Licensed Site Remediation Board. Mike received his BS in economics from James Madison University and JD from the University of Richmond. Mike is going to discuss the new stormwater management rules that municipalities need to pass an ordinance and what enhanced actions they can do to go beyond the state minimum requirements. Okay, I'm going to turn over the screen to you now. Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you, Randy. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to talk at NJDEP Congress. It's always a great opportunity. And so we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, or at least it's been for the last couple months, stormwater management in New Jersey. And it's, I'm looking forward to it. So I have a lot of slides and I'm going to go through them, some of them very quickly. As Matt talked about, you know, the importance of protecting water for drinking water. And I'll talk about that in a second, but we all know some flooding issues we have in this state. And a lot of that is because of our stormwater management, our land use development. As we create impervious surfaces, that water has nowhere to go but into our streets, and there's aftermath. And what we also know, as you know, impervious surface is increasing, but we've also been experiencing a lot more water. So there's been a change, and this slide's a couple years old, but in the first 70 years of the 20th century, you know, New Jersey averaged about a little over 44 inches of rain a year. That's increased in the first, I think, is 14 or 15 years of the 21st century, which kind of results in a lot more water that we have to deal with. And it's also important to note, not only we're dealing with a lot more water, but our regulations really haven't kept up with what we have to deal with in real life. So most of us, you know, who are on ECs or go to planning boards, you know, have heard about the 2, 10, and 100-year storm. Well, those are defined based upon history, about 100 years of history that ended in 2006. So it doesn't really account for rain increases and other changes that have happened in the last 14 years and will continue to happen. That's going to change, and I'll talk maybe a little bit about that going forwards, but you know, realize, you know, as we increase impervious surfaces and rains are increasing, also the pattern of rain has increased. So we are starting to have a 55% increase in those sort of extreme heavy rain events. So instead of having a rain come over a long, you know, gentle period of time, it's now coming down in a much quicker and harder period of time. And that has real world implications because as you know, rain runs off our impervious surfaces, it carries pollution. Everything that we intentionally or unintentionally put on our ground goes somewhere. These are two charts, 6 years apart, that DEP puts out, looking at water quality and whether they are meeting designated uses. And you will see in drinking water, there was a certain segment of waters that New Jersey monitored that did not meet that standard. That has continued over over 6 years. And if I had put up the chart from 2004, you would see roughly the same thing. And that's because, again, from a report that DEP puts out roughly every 2 years, water quality is declining, and that is because of land use in our stormwater management. So DEP, as part of a process to update our stormwater rules, published in March of this year, new green infrastructure stormwater rules. And those have changed sort of the techniques and some of the other things on how we manage stormwater. I want to be clear that it does not change any of the standards. So if you're familiar, it does not change the quality, quantity, and recharge requirements of our stormwater management. So it still has to reduce the peak flows or rates of runoff for the 2, 10, and 100-year storms. You still have to treat for 80% total suspended solids. It just changes how you do that. So the first thing it does is talk about green infrastructure techniques and require those. It changes what surfaces you have to treat water quality from, and I'll talk about that. And it changes some of the mitigation requirements if you can't meet those standards, what you have to do. It requires deed notices for all stormwater management systems. Municipalities had 1 year from March 3rd to have a new ordinance adopted in effect, and also removes something called the non-structural strategies from the design standards and puts them into the planning requirements. So just quickly, I know Dr. Abrupta is going to talk about what green infrastructure is. This is what DEP's definition is. Using soil, using vegetation, or reusing stormwater. Very, sort of intuitive what green infrastructure is. And this will be the primary way that developments will be treating stormwater going forward once your municipality has adopted a new ordinance. And one of the big changes using that green infrastructure is not only are they requiring green, but they are trying to mimic nature, trying to decentralize stormwater management. And so they've created maximum drainage areas for some of these techniques. So if you have a small scale bioretention, you can only have 2.5 acres of impervious surface drained to that bioretention system. Dry wells can only have 1 acre. So what you're going to see going forward is, instead of having a large development with your large infiltration basin down the bottom of the hill of that development, sort of off to the side and in the middle of often not really intrusive, but what you're going to see is a lot of smaller decentralized systems spread throughout the development, bringing it closer to the source of pollution and allowing nature and mimicking nature a bit. So that is a big change from why we have been doing things in the past. The other thing they did is, as I mentioned, they sort of tweaked the definition of major development. So stormwater management rules are only triggered when you do major development. It is not triggered with anything that doesn't meet that definition. And that definition is generically 1 acre of soil disturbance or 1/4 acre of impervious surface. And with the new rules, they have bifurcated impervious surfaces to basically ones that you could drive a motor vehicle over or airplane, or surfaces you don't. So roofs, sidewalks, patios, you do not have to treat for water quality. Things that you drive over or could drive over, so parking lots, driveways, roads, parking decks, do have to have treatment for water quality. And they also created sort of this look back. So if that 1/4 acre of impervious surface was created since February 2nd of 2004, or over a period of time since that 2004 date, you have to treat for water quality. And the importance of the 2004 date is that was when the last major update of stormwater management and those current standards came into place. we don't believe this bifurcation is appropriate. And, I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The other thing is mitigation. So there are going to be times where sites cannot meet those standards of quantity, quality, and recharge on their site for various reasons. And while the rules have always had an ability to get a variance, the mitigation requirements were a little looser. So what DEP has done is tightened those up a bit and now have required that the applicant truly show that meeting those standards are technically impracticable, and there's a definition for that in the rule, and that it is technically impracticable for quantity, it's technically impracticable for quality, and technically impracticable for recharge. And if you can do one or more of those, you have to. And they also made sure that if you have 2 or 3 or 4 drainage areas in your site, you have to show it for each of those drainage areas. You can't just put a blanket statement on that site. If you can meet part of that standard, you have to. And then you can get a relief or a variance for that part or portion of the site you can't meet the standard. But then you have to take a project on, a mitigation project on, and that project, and this is a change, has to happen before or during the construction of the project you got a variance. So if you got a variance from a recharge requirement, you have to identify a mitigation project that does recharge. That project has to be within the same HUC 14 or watershed as your project, and you actually have to do that project before you start or finish your project. It can no longer be a promise to do a project sometime in the future, because a lot of times those future projects never happened. So that is another big change, and you have to have a mitigation plan to give a variance. That's not a change from what has been, but if you have to do a mitigation project beforehand, you better have a mitigation plan in place in order to give those variances. So you can either identify sites in your mitigation plan that you want mitigation projects to occur, or you could set up criteria by which mitigation projects can be proposed. So what would the planning board or zoning board look at when judging whether a mitigation project would work and address those standards that you're waiving? So that's a big change. May not actually have many impacts because a lot of towns don't actually have a mitigation plan in place. So technically they can't give variances. So I mean, that is very broad brushed, very quick of the changes. I just wanted to again reiterate, it hasn't changed the standards. It changed how you did stormwater management. And as I showed before, water quality is not meeting the standards. And there's a couple problems and a couple reasons for that. Because our stormwater management rules are designed not necessarily to stop water pollution, not necessarily designed to stop the impacts of development, but are to minimize those impacts. So our water quality problems are still getting worse. It's just not as quickly as if we did not have stormwater management. They only apply to large developments, those projects that meet that definition of 1 acre of soil disturbance and a 1/4 acre of impervious surface, whether it's motor vehicle traveled or not. And it does not do anything to address all of the development that occurred before modern stormwater management rules occurred. So all the projects, all the development in our communities that happens in the early 1900s, the mid 1900s, before stormwater management came in place, that had no stormwater management still doesn't. And they are contributing to the problem. So the Watershed Institute and other organizations have come up with some recommendations. And I'm pulling up sort of that screenshot from the water quality report from DEP, and a blurb from there. It really targets this is a land use, a stormwater management problem. Our water quality problems are flooding issues, and why it's so important that we can do better, that we can take the current standards and improve upon them. And also DEP recognizes sort of the, I don't want to say inadequacy of stormwater management rules, but that they don't necessarily always go far enough in all of our communities. And in the model ordinance which DEP released with the new rules, they've specifically called out the ability of municipalities to go stronger. A lot of words, but I've highlighted the sort of important ones. So as I mentioned, the Watershed Institute has developed a series of recommendations and an enhanced model ordinance to address some of the problems we are seeing. And here's sort of the broad brush. The first one is changing that definition of major development. So triggering it to be smaller. So instead of an acre soil disturbance, half acre. And instead of a quarter acre impervious surface, 5,000 square feet. So that we're really starting to address more and more projects. So stormwater management is being seen more uniformly through our communities. Also for redevelopment. So under the current rules, if you're not disturbing an acre of soil because all you're doing is redeveloping a site, you're not creating a new quarter acre of impervious surfaces, you don't really do stormwater management the way you would with a greenfield. We think you should take this opportunity when you're redeveloping a site to incorporate stormwater management to start addressing those sort of sins of the past, which may be sins of the past that we didn't know were at the time. And also an on-site retention. So as I maybe mentioned, our quantity rules, you're supposed to reduce the peak flow of 2, 10, and 100-year storms. That's not a volume reduction, even though they're called quantity. It's really a rate, how fast that stormwater is running off the site. Because in reality, when you develop a site, you are pushing more stormwater off the site. So having some of that storm stay on site and retained and never leave will help. I will say that DEP is looking at proposing new regs at the end of this year, which will address an on-site retention. We're urging municipalities to sort of take that opportunity now. Creating a minor development requirement so that even if you're not triggering major development, but you're adding onto your building, you're adding impervious surfaces on your property, you start to account for your impacts on your environment. So we have made that trigger at 250 square feet, treat 2 gallons of stormwater per square foot using green infrastructure. This is supposed to be very easy. You're a landscape architect, your architect who helped design your addition or development can help you design a system to accommodate this. And also, most of us, when we do additions, we do these small scale projects, we are doing landscaping anyway. Incorporate your stormwater management to it. And recognizing that there is going to be circumstances where you can't do stormwater management. So like major development, you might not be able to do it. Unlike major development, instead of requiring you to do a project somewhere else, pay a waiver fee so the municipality can do some of that stormwater management and account for your impacts. So a waiver fee for minor development, showing that you really can't do it on site. Municipality can take that money to improve its existing stormwater management system and improve upon it. Just a way to create some flexibility and ability to do some things that might not be able to occur on that site. The other thing is enhance what you need to do, look at as you're developing your stormwater management systems. Are there forests? What are core forests? So those forests, portions of forest that are 300 feet or so from the edge. Edge forest is really great for invasive species. Core forests are really good for native. We want to protect those. It might be great if you stay out of wetlands, but if you're redirecting all the stormwater from that wetland that would normally flow there, what is the long-term impacts to those wetlands? What are your impacts to your adjacent owners? Really having the developer come in and take a look at those things. As I mentioned, treat all surfaces, not just motor vehicle surfaces for water quality. Continuing to use those non-structural strategies. So DEP took those out because they were too hard to implement. But we think those things are important. So, disconnecting impervious surfaces, using low impact construction techniques, minimizing lawn, using native species. There's, like I said, 9 of them, but DEP took those out, and just might be an extreme example, but if you're supposed to use nature and mimic nature using green infrastructure, if you're able to design a site, completely clear it from all vegetation, regrade it, and plop a rain garden in, you've kind of missed the point. So we think keeping those low impact non-structural strategies are important, so we've kept those in. And then total maximum daily loads. This is a very complex issue, very wonky issue, but basically, if your waterway is not clean enough to meet standards, DEP in many cases will have a pollution budget. How much pollution can go into that stream and it meet standards? Well, that means your stormwater management should take that into account. And municipalities are required to take a look at what TMDLs exist and think about what things they should do to improve water quality. But we are hardwiring that look and that thought process into our stormwater management rules. And then maintenance. Maintenance is extremely important. And so we've created a maintenance program with a permit, periodic maintenance inspections, which are required by law, but having those reports made, and then an annual report to the municipality to help the municipality comply with their permit requirements. And so that is the discussion. Just again, municipalities have until March 21st to have a new stormwater management ordinance in place. Understanding it has to go to the county for review and for up to 60 days. So that deadline is rapidly approaching. We have a bunch of webinars and resources and training coming up for municipalities and others to understand this green infrastructure rule and what will have to happen going forward. But I greatly appreciate this time. And I don't know if we want to do questions or pass it on already.
Yeah, we're going to do questions at the end, so we'll wait till then. Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. You really presented a lot of information, a lot of things to digest, critical information for environmental commissioners, not only because they are going to be obviously reviewing these development applications as they come in with these new rules, but it's important also, I think, for environmental commissioners to look at what kind of recommendations they might want to give their local governments or municipal governments to see where they can enhance the ordinance that they're going to have to put in place by March 2021. So I think that's really critical. If they put together some recommendations and present them to their local governments, I think that would really go a long way. Next, we're going to have Chris Abrupta, who is going to be talking about the green infrastructure practices that will meet the requirements under these new DEP stormwater management rules. And I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with Chris's name, as he and his crew from Rutgers are all over New Jersey installing rain gardens everywhere. Chris is the director of the New Jersey Water Resources Research Institute, an extension specialist in water resources with the Rutgers Cooperative Extension, a professor with the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers. Chris is responsible for developing and managing the water resources program for Rutgers Cooperative Extension, the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station, which integrates research, education, extension components for agriculture, water management, stormwater management, green infrastructure, and watershed planning and restoration. Chris also serves on the Hillsborough Environmental Commission and has a doctorate in civil engineering from Stevens Institute of Technology. Chris, you're up for your presentation. Thank you. Need to unmute yourself, Chris. Chris, we can't hear you.
How about now? Good?
Good.
Can you hear me now, Randy? Yep.
Yeah,
good?
we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm using the phone, I'm using the computer. Things are kind of crazy today. Thank you for letting me speak today, and I love Mike's presentation. Every time I see, the recommendations for kind of a more advanced stormwater ordinances, cool things are always popping up, you know, and it's just, I forget how much neat stuff is in there. So thank you, Mike, for doing that. Well, Mike gave you this definition of green infrastructure, and this is the one DEP uses. I put it up here because I think it's interesting to think about it. When we think green infrastructure, we think plants and things like that, but the first picture on the left is of a porous asphalt parking lot. So you can see the parking spaces are porous asphalt, and the cartway where you drive in is regular asphalt. And the water goes through the porous asphalt and sits in there and eventually infiltrates in the ground. So it really addresses, you know, the green infrastructure definition of infiltrating water into the subsoil, so it goes in the soil beneath the parking lot. The second one talks about filtering vegetation with vegetation or soil, and the other one talks about storing water for reuse, okay? So these are the tables that Mike didn't show you, I think, in the regulations, because they're extremely boring and hard to follow, but there's a couple tables in the regulations, and like Mike said, we really have to still satisfy the same requirements as before. So we have to remove 80% of the TSS, which is the total suspended solid, so that's the second column here. We have to satisfy runoff quantity standards, which is reducing the peak flow from the 2, the 10, and the 100-year storm. And then we have to promote groundwater recharge. So you have to maintain 100% of your annual average groundwater recharge. So you can see all the best management practices in here that they show in this table, or the green infrastructure practices, the cistern, the dry well, the grass swale. None of these satisfy all three of the requirements, okay? So you're not going to probably see a lot of these then in your plans that are submitted to the town. Instead, you're going to see a lot of these, okay? So these are the other ones. So Pervious paving systems removes about 80% of the sediment. It can be used to control the runoff quantity for the 2, the 10, 100-year storm, and it can be used to promote groundwater recharge, okay? If you have to do groundwater recharge. Sometimes you don't have to do groundwater recharge because if there's no groundwater recharging before you put the development in, to maintain 100% of the annual average groundwater recharge. If it's 0, then you don't have any afterwards. So sometimes you don't need to do that. But for the most part, groundwater recharge is another important factor. A small-scale bioretention system, once again, 80 to 90% sediment removal, can satisfy the quantity and the groundwater recharge requirements. Small-scale infiltration and small-scale sand filters all can do that. So these are the systems you're going to see. Now, and what I'm saying here is small scale is very important. Mike pointed out that these systems can only be designed to handle about 2.5 acres of impervious cover. So typically a housing development in New Jersey may be a 50-lot subdivision, maybe it's on 50 acres, and all the water runs down the hill and goes to a big detention basin. You're not going to see that anymore. I mean, that does not satisfy the standard requirements of New Jersey DEP. Instead, you're going to see these practices sprinkled throughout the entire development and capturing that water closer to where it lands, okay? Instead of letting it run all the way down the hill and pick up pollution on its way, okay? So that's what we're going to see. So I'm going to talk about some of these systems. This is Pervious paving systems. The original asphalt, I tell people in this country, was a coarse material, and then water would pass through the surface and just sit below the surface. It would freeze, expand and contract, and the pothole was created. So we as civil engineers said, we could fix that. We'll add fine material to the asphalt, and that way water will never go through it. We'll never have another pothole. And, well, lo and behold, that really didn't work, did it, right? So somebody went back and said, well, what if we think about this a little differently? Instead of stopping the water from going through the surface, let's give the water a place to go. So let's go back to the porous asphalt, let the water go through the asphalt, but go into a stone layer underneath, sit in that stone layer, and slowly infiltrate into the ground. And as the water's moving through the stone, it gets cleaner and cleaner, and eventually gets to the groundwater table. So that's kind of what these pervious paving systems are. The porous asphalt is a little softer than regular asphalt, so we only use it in the parking spots. In the cartways where you see the cars drive in and out, we use regular asphalt, and the water from that will flow on to the porous asphalt. New Jersey DEP allows you to have 3 times the area flow onto a porous asphalt parking space. So a parking space is typically 200 square feet, so you could have 600 feet of regular asphalt flowing on that to actually be managed. Okay, so permeable pavements, underlying stone reservoir, there's all different types of permeable pavements. I'll show you a few of these here. This is a cross-section of the parking lot, so that stone layer under the parking lot can be as thick as you need it to be. So in a lot of cases, it's only 6 to 12 inches thick. Other cases, it can be as much as 8 feet thick. So it depends how much water you want to store, because for the porosity of the stone is about 35 to 40%. So for every 3 gallons of stone, you can store a gallon of water. Okay, so that's kind of how we look at this, right? People like this, developers like this, because they can put the system under the parking lot so they don't lose developable land, right? So that's really nice. It promotes groundwater recharge, and the water that's going into the ground is clean because it's filtering through the stone. It can help with the heat island effect. If you've ever been in an urban area in the summer when it's really hot, the asphalt and the black roofs tend to heat up the city. And it takes a long time for that to cool down. When we're in the suburbs, the roadways and the asphalt, they heat up during the day, but at night they cool down. In the cities, they don't, because it stays hot much longer there because it doesn't have a chance to cool down. So the porous asphalt breathes, so air can pass through the asphalt, so it's a much cooler system, okay? So that becomes another thing we think about. So we can see this is the parking lot I showed you originally. This was actually done in Clark, New Jersey, at the municipal building. This was going to be a regular parking lot, and we convinced them to use porous asphalt. And Clark is a very environmentally conscious community. So we paved this, and they actually saved some money because they didn't have to put catch basins in, because the water goes right through the asphalt, so you really don't need the catch basins in the piping anymore. Okay? This is pervious concrete. It looks a little different than regular concrete. It looks a little bit more popcorny. The one issue with pervious concrete, if you over salt it, you can deteriorate it, and it turns into kind of a dusty surface that doesn't infiltrate any longer. So be very careful about maintaining this when you install this. This is a street that we had done down in Camden. Okay, permeable pavers, for those folks who are very wealthy, can afford this kind of stuff. These are very expensive. The idea is that the water goes through the cracks between the paving stones, and goes into a stone layer underneath and works just like the asphalt and the concrete. But like I said, it's a very expensive system, right? So because pavers are much more expensive than the asphalt and the concrete. And then we have things like this called grass pavers, right? So this is a concrete block with diamonds in the middle, and we put stone and soil in the diamonds, and the grass can grow through the diamonds, and the water will go through that surface into a stone layer underneath. What's nice about this surface is this can hold heavy loads, right? So we put this behind in this application is behind a public works building in Parsippany, and it's actually a fire access road. So you can drive fire trucks on this. After we installed this, the weekend after we installed this, they got 6 inches of rain, and usually the water would pond up on this road and seep back into the building and flood out the director's office. In this case, all the water stayed on the road, infiltrated. There was no flooding in the building, so it worked out very, very effectively. Okay. So small-scale bioretention systems, we often call these rain gardens, okay, because a rain garden is a much easier thing to say than bioretention system. And if I came to your neighborhood and I said I'd like to give everybody a free bioretention system, you'd probably throw me out. But if I told you I'd give you a free rain garden, you might say, hey, that's great. We'll take a free rain garden from Rutgers. That's wonderful, right? So in this case, we're using native plants to capture the water, infiltrate back into the soil. These are shallow landscape depressions, usually 3 to 12 inches deep. You can see you can put them almost anywhere. So on a parking lot island, we use them to take downspout runoff. We use them to take road runoff. So these are just really, really nice systems. You can see this one is one done at a school. We use the existing catch basin in the school, and we dug out around it. So when that gets 6 inches of water in it, the water stays in there and will slowly percolate into the ground. As it's moving through the soil, the water's getting cleaner and cleaner. The plants take up the nutrients. There's microbial layer in the soil and the mulch to help decompose some of the pollutants. Once you get 7 inches of water in it, it overflows and goes into that catch basin and goes back the way it was going out. So Mike was saying that our rainfall is increasing in New Jersey. We're getting much more severe storms. Most of these systems can be designed to capture the first 3 to 4 inches of rain. So they become very nice systems, right? Here's another one that we had done in Camden, and this is, I like this picture because you can see in the top left corner, you can see the trench drain. So it's actually taking water from the road under the sidewalk through that trench drain and going into this rain garden. In the center of the rain garden, you can see a little atrium drain, so when it gets to a certain level, the excess water goes out there and actually goes into an overflow garden. So there's 4 gardens in this area that can take water from this intersection. And this is a really nice one too. This is one that we have at a library. The water runs right off the parking lot, right into the system. You can see it's a beautiful system. It's very manicured. There's a lot of mulch between the plants. You've got a nice multi-stem river birch in there. You've got a lot of flowering plants to help with the pollinator habitat. So it's a very nice holistic system, right? The other thing we tend to use are these sand filter systems where it's basically a rain garden, but instead of plants, they put sand in the bottom, right? And the water kind of filters through the sand. And the idea is that the sand purifies. This is actually borrowed from the wastewater industry. The problem though with the wastewater industry, they have systems where they can backflush the sand. So if you think about a pool filter, it's very similar to that, where water goes through the sand in the pool filter, and that pool filter will filter out until it becomes clogged, and then you've got a backwash and you kind of flush that stuff out of the pool filter. The problem with this in stormwater is there's no way to backflush this. You have to go in there and manually rake it out and break it up and clean it up. So it does require some maintenance, okay? And it can be used in a bunch of different ways, infiltration systems like sand filters. And here we have an infiltration trench. This is a really nice system because on the left, the water kind of comes in. There's a forebay. This is looking at it from an aerial view. The water comes into the left in that forebay area. Sediment will settle out, and then the water will overflow into this detention basin system that actually has the infiltration trench in it. What's nice about this is when you have to go clean out the sediment, you only have to clean out the sediment in the forebay, right? So you don't have to rebuild this system every time you do it. You just have to go in this forebay, take the sediment out, and then it continues to function the way it was meant to. Okay, you can see this is a cross-section of that system. Once again, the forebay is on top, and you can design this to handle any storm, right? So the 2-year, the 10-year, the 100-year storm. A 100-year storm is about 8 inches to 8.5 inches of rain over 24 hours, right? So this will hold that water and let it out slowly over time and help prevent flooding downstream. What's very important when you're reviewing these plans, though, for any infiltration system, is you need a minimum of 2 foot between the bottom of the system and the seasonal high water table. When your contractor comes in with plans and you're an environmental commissioner, you're looking at it, they do a lot of these soil testing, but the problem is they have to be at the level of the bottom of the basin when they do the testing, right? So if they do testing at the surface, right, and so look, it infiltrates fine, we're way above the groundwater table, then they dig the basin 8 feet deep and they into the groundwater table, it's not going to work, right? So we see a lot of those things failing because of that. We also see a lot of these things failing because the seasonal high water table isn't measured correctly, so water comes up and down seasonally, and that can affect whether you can infiltrate water or not, right? So you can see these small-scale sand filters. Now, some of these sand filters, like you might see these on the Parkway, they do have topsoil on them and grass on them, so that helps filter out some more of the pollutants, but really the main treatment here is the sand that's underneath that grass layer, okay? So the sand bed and water kind of goes through that. And then here's another profile view with the under drain system in it. So it takes the water away, in which case this will filter the water, clean the water, but not infiltrate the water because you have that perforated under drain pipe in the center, so that water goes through the system, hits that pipe, and gets carried away back to the system. So if you don't need to infiltrate, you can still use systems like this, okay? And you can see this with the under drain throughout the system. So those are all the slides I have. I mean, I think as an environmental commissioner, it's a little bit easier for me because I have a degree in civil engineering, and now the engineers who submit plans in my town know that. So they're very well prepared when they come to present something to the environmental commission, because I always have all the hard questions for them. But it's very interesting, as you're going to see in the future, you're going to see much smaller systems scattered throughout the development. And one of the big questions you're going to need to ask is, what's the drainage, how much impervious cover drains each one of these systems? Is it less than 2.5 acres? Because if it's more than 2.5 acres, then they don't satisfy the stormwater requirements. Okay, so that's going to be a very important question. The depth of groundwater is a very important question you need to ask. And then maintenance. Mike mentioned that they need to have a maintenance manual. Who's going to implement that maintenance? Because now you're not just maintaining one big basin by mowing it once a week. You have to go into the development and maintain all these smaller systems. Okay, and that's going to be a bit tricky for a lot of people. So there you have it, Randy.
All right, thank you so
Back
much.
to you.
I really appreciate that. That's a lot to take in, and it was a great overview of the green infrastructure practices. Again, really important for environmental commissioners, so they understand what the practices are and how they're supposed to be designed, even if they don't have a degree in civil engineering. We're going to now switch gears just slightly and hear from Dan Bachelis, who is the chairman of the Hamilton Environmental Commission. One of the tools that are now available to local governments is to establish a stormwater utility, which is a public utility that can assess fees and uses the revenues of those fees to construct and maintain infrastructure for stormwater management. Hamilton is just beginning this process to see if a stormwater utility is feasible for their community to address some of the stormwater issues. Dan is going to discuss the process. And Dan is extremely active in Hamilton. Not only did he serve as the EC chair, he also the chair of the Lake Water Quality Advisory Committee, Veterans Advisory Committee, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Hamilton Revitalization Corporation, which is the town's official Main Street program. And that's just, and the list goes on. There's a number of other things that he's involved in. When Dan served as the town councilman, he adopted Hamilton's water conservation tax rebate program, Adopt a Park and Adopt a Street programs, and helped achieve silver certification with Sustainable Jersey. He's now retired after 36 years with the New Jersey Department of Human Services. He received his BA from Boston College and MA in sociology from Rutgers. So Dan, you now have the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Randy. After hearing all of that, I'm tired already. But I'll share my screen. Hopefully this works okay. Okay, hopefully everybody's seeing that. Let me start the slideshow. If I can figure out how to, here we go. Let me just say that the whole idea of a stormwater utility is embedded in the new DEP regs. And it allows, it does not require, but it allows municipalities to create the utility to provide funding for ongoing maintenance and development of a municipality's stormwater system. We've had, I guess, while I'm waiting for the slide, here we go. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, I guess hopefully everybody sees that. A little bit about Hamilton. It is a pinelands town in the middle of the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, located between Philly and Atlantic City. It's in the far northwest corner of Atlantic City, so we're bordered by not only other Atlantic County and municipalities, but also those in Camden County. We're a little bit of everything, 25% farmland, a lot of Wharton State Forest covers the northern part of the town. We have 20% developed land. Personally, I tend to think that might be a little higher, but those are the numbers I've gotten. And 28% wetlands. So there's a lot of sensitive environment to protect. We have about 14,000, 15,000 people. The town is a very conservative town, both financially or fiscally, as well as socially, but we do have an active green team. We've been able to accomplish a lot of things on the environmental front, not as much as I would like, but we're making progress. The town we were founded by a bunch of independent Yankees from New England a couple of 100 years ago, who were followed by a large influx of Italian immigrants who have become the dominant group in town. Our do-it-yourself, self-reliant, go-it-alone attitude is reflected in the fact that we have volunteer fire departments. We operate our own water supply and treatment utilities, which poses additional issues of not dumping our treated wastewater, which does get a tertiary treatment, but we need to stay out of Hamilton Creek. We've had a lot of discussions, I'll put it that way, with NJDEP and the Pinelands Commission about staying out of the creek. We developed a system of beneficial reuse of the treated wastewater now to with some overland and underground drip lines that actually keep one of our major ball fields green. Again, strong reliance on volunteer activity in the town, and along with all of that, a dislike of increased taxes, fees, and government in general. A lot of people, when they heard the idea of stormwater utility, and a lot of the opposition statewide to this refers to it as taxes. Well, they're not taxes, they're fees. You pay for what you're getting. You're getting a service from the town. You pay a fee just as you pay for your water and pay for your sewer, and beyond that, pay for electricity and whatnot. Our stormwater system, the town is, as I said, 200 years old. We celebrated our 150th as a formal municipality in 2016. Portions of our system are over 100 years old. It's a patchwork of various materials, which does not help contribute to system stability. We're in the process of trying to address that through a fairly vigorous road and utility replacement program over the course of the next forever years. We have over 600 stormwater inlets, and this is a big problem because most of those inlets, 500 plus, haven't been cleaned out in probably 10 years. They're filled up to the line, so the water just rushes through, and at least a dozen of those outfalls flow into Hamilton Lake, which is a 75-acre man-made lake created 200 years ago to power a glass factory. Considered the jewel of Hamilton, very popular for fishermen, fisherwomen, boating. We used to have swimming, and that's why the Hamilton Lake Water Quality Advisory Committee was created, because we weren't meeting our Department of Health standards to continue swimming. So we're working to improve that. We have collaborated with Chris and his water resources program to develop one green infrastructure demo installation at our lake park, and we're working with them to create more around the town. New Jersey Manufacturers, which has its insurance company, which has its South Jersey headquarters in Hamilton, has a really envy-producing system of green infrastructure, stormwater management that has to be seen to be believed. So we have a lot of these, that's background there. Our issues are, like many issues in other municipalities, localized flooding, partly caused by stormwater inlets that are backed up and not draining water fast enough. Lake pollution, as I said, we've seen that fecal coliform bacteria levels after a major precipitation event skyrocket throughout the lake. We're still tracking down the actual source of that contamination. We have periodic line breakdowns, clay pipe breaks, or the sewer lines, when they cross, they'll collapse, and then you get not just a stormwater drainage problem, but you get a lot more pollution of the system. I've mentioned inlet maintenance, which is a big problem, most of which is caused by a lack of consistent funding for maintenance and repair. Our public works staff is a very small staff, hardest working people in Hamilton. But we need more staff, we need more equipment, we need more funding to pay for the maintenance and to replace it. So what could we do about that? Well, League of Conservation Voters Education Fund came to our rescue. We recently received a $20,000 grant from the League of Conservation Voters Education Fund to pay for a feasibility study to look into the possibility of creating a stormwater management utility. LCV came out to our town council, our environmental commission, the Lake Water Quality Committee, over a course of at least 2 years, probably 3, to talk to us about the coming stormwater management rules and to basically ask us to consider creating a stormwater management utility. The Environmental Commission sent some members out to some of the public events created by the League of Conservation Voters, highly informative, and created a willingness to look at the facts, to try to get the facts, and not just, again, react from the attitude that, oh, we don't want another tax, we don't want another fee, we're not going to do it, we're doing just fine. Since we've discussed the issue many times at the Environmental Commission and at the Lake Water Quality Committee, we get press coverage of those in the local newspaper, the Hamilton Gazette, and that's helped to create some awareness of the issue. I'm sure a lot of the details have escaped a lot of the public, but that's fine. We'll work on that. We've also, the Gazette has an environmental journalism fellowship, so they are also focusing on a lot of environmental issues, including stormwater management rules. They've done some coverage on this, interviewed the mayor, who not unexpectedly said he's against any more taxes or fees. We had some subsequent discussion with him about not just resting on that statement, but actually looking at getting the facts and doing a feasibility study, to which he immediately said, yes, let's do it. Now, so he's, again, conservative in reaction, but very progressive in terms of let's find out what we're really talking about so that we can try to move ahead if it makes sense. The application itself is a short 3 pages, just a couple of pages of a cover sheet, which got some basic information about are you located within the Delaware River watershed. Now, the League of Conservation Voters was focusing on the Delaware River watershed, but there was an exemption for, or an extension of that to municipalities some municipalities in the Kirkwood-Cohansey watershed, which is probably the cleanest and largest watershed in the state. Hamilton sits right on top of one of the deepest areas of the watershed, so we did qualify for that. The grant talked about background and capacity to deliver. Very short executive summary, 1 paragraph, a couple of paragraphs of background, and the fact that many bodies in town have already collaborated with a wide variety of folks around the state, including DEP, the Pinelands Commission, Stockton University, Sustainable Jersey, New Jersey Future, the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, Rutgers, and other, including individual engineer firms like Princeton Hydro or Kleinfelter, and our own Adams, Raymond, and Hagen, our town engineers. So we've got the training, we've got the collaboration and the relationships that we have established and can go back to make sure we get this done. The project strategy and outcomes and goals were very simple. We want to get the facts. We want to make sure we have a comprehensive analysis of what is involved in creating a stormwater utility. What would the fees need to be? How low can we keep the fees? And we'll probably investigate how to introduce this so that we, if we decide to go ahead with it, that we do so in a way that respects the pocketbooks and the sensibilities of the residents. League of Conservation Voters Education Fund, since it was a rolling application, while we weren't under the gun to meet a particular deadline, you also have to take into account the fact that other people are applying, getting approved, and the money's rolling out the door. We were very fortunate, and we thank them immensely for providing a $20,000 fund for this. The project will cost about $37,000. We estimate the remainder of the money is basically in-kind contributions from our various town staff, public works manager, public works supervisor, utility department supervisor, town solicitor review, and then a lot of volunteer time reviews from our environmental commission, the Lake Water Quality Committee, and our land use board, which is a combined planning and zoning board. That's really basically it. We have a rough time frame for this. We just got notified in September about this. Pardon me. So we're in the process of getting the town council to accept and sign the agreement. We'll get that back later this month. We'll solicit consultants through probably a request for qualifications. Hopefully, we'll finalize that in December. We may have to go to the January meeting of town council to finalize that, and then we'll complete the study. Again, I always say things always take longer than they take. So we're shooting for June 2021 at the latest. By that time, we'll have updated our stormwater rules, our ordinance to comply with the state mandate. And we'll have, pardon me, a couple of extra months beyond that to examine the feasibility of the stormwater utility. So that'll kind of mesh all together. We get our ordinance done in March. That'll be reported on in April, rather broadly here. And then, so that the scene will be set, if you will, for discussion of a stormwater utility. I'm sure it'll be a very lively discussion, given the town's history. But we've done other things that made things interesting for people in town. Personally, I think it may be a good way to help us avoid having to borrow money and pay interest on it when we bond for these sorts of things, with a fee that creates minimal impact for our residents. But again, we're going to base our decisions on the actual facts. That's it. It's pretty short and sweet. So if anybody has questions, we'll be happy to deal with them. Thanks very much, Randy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jan. I'm really looking forward to the results of your feasibility study in coming up.
Yep.
And I did want to just mention before we go to the Q&A that NJDEP is also a founding member of the Flood Defense Fund with NJLCV and has helped provide grants and support for municipalities for stormwater utilities. So we're actively involved in that process also. So we're going to go to the Q&A. I know we don't have that much time. We like to try to keep this to at least an hour and a half. Any questions that we can't answer, we will put to our panelists so that you can get response. I know some of the questions have already been answered in the Q&A directly to people who have given questions, but we do have a question from Walter. The Northeast is a warming trend and increase in precipitation. Obviously, warmer water holds more water and can lead to change in the local ecology. Are we addressing these factors in a timely fashion? That's kind of a broad question. So anyone want to take a stab at that? You'll have to unmute yourself, yeah.
If Chris is not going to jump up, I would say as an advocate, no, we're not. I mean, these are things we've known for quite a while. I will say DEP, as part of the governor's executive order at the beginning of this year to examine climate change and integrate that into its land use and other permitting, is going to start to do that. As I mentioned during my presentation, they're going to propose some climate change focus changes to the stormwater rules at the end of this year, which will start. But right now, it's not.
Okay. Anything to add to that, Chris, or that's good? You're on mute. Yeah, Chris, you have to, we can't hear you, Chris. There you go.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, nothing is in the current regulations deals at all with climate change, and we're going to have to add something to it in the future. But there's also a lot of question on what has to be added. It's hard to get solid answers out from the climate guys exactly how water is going to change. As an engineer, we need to pick standards that we have to design to, you know, and the standards really aren't readily available yet of what we should design to in the future, because we don't know what's going to happen really. So if everybody keeps buying electric cars, you know, maybe everything will be solved. We don't have to worry about it. But we eventually do have to kind of come up with new standards on what to design to, and hopefully that'll come out in new regulations that Mike and everybody else is working on. So.
All right. We have a question from Steve. How much impact does the county review entail? And I assume this is regard to the ordinances that have to be passed by the municipalities.
You know, I'm not, to be honest, clear on exactly what their review process. They have 60 days to review it and approve it. And if they don't act within 60 days, it's deemed approved. So it's something I've been meaning to look into and just have not figured that out at this point.
I had a question just to follow up on that. What kind of oversight is the state actually going to have with regards to these new ordinances and making sure they're actually being followed at the municipal level? Yeah.
So annually, all municipalities do a stormwater report to DEP. It's a certification, and one of them would be, I would imagine, I believe it is, you know, when's the last time you've updated your ordinance? What are the contents of the ordinance? The other check, and DP does some audits, and the other check is when a project that gets approved at the planning board or zoning board needs additional permits, flood hazard, wetlands, CAFR permits, maybe one or waterfront development. DP will see those and will see the stormwater management plans, but that could be less than 25% of the overall developments in the state.
Thank you. We have a question from Mary. Our town is repaving a lot of its roads and putting in curbs that drain to stormwater grates. Keep asking them to investigate the curb cuts, swales, etc., but nothing happens. Where's the best practice for draining water from the roads documented? I'd like to she wants to point them out to our engineers, and of course Chris has stepped away from his desk, so maybe we'll hold off until he gets back on that. I just realized he's not there right now, so that's probably a question for him. Let's see, we have a question from Walter. This is for you, Dan, in reference to lake pollution. Is there a significant waterfowl, geese, other sources of pollution, and what about farmland runoff and phosphorus runoff?
Well, Hamilton Lake is almost completely surrounded by residential properties. With the changes in the state's fertilizer law, we haven't seen significant phosphorus runoff in that regard. The farms are really on the outer edges of the municipality. We do have a good flock of Canada geese every year, some of whom have stayed in the area permanently. For a long time, it was felt that the geese were the source of the coliform bacteria spikes. But when we started actually doing testing, again, getting the basic facts, and finding that one of the major sources, one of the perennially highest levels of coliform bacteria was in a feeder called Fowler's Creek, right, which is right alongside our lake park. And the beach area, which everybody complained about with the geese, was relatively clean. We don't think it's the geese. Some people still think it's the geese. Personally, I don't think it's the geese. We're actually working we'll be working with Stockton to investigate that more thoroughly in terms of sources. So, geese could be a problem, but I don't think so. I think it stems from something much more nefarious tied to our unkempt stormwater management system. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess if following up like with stormwater utilities, the question from Dennis, would a stormwater utility work in a town where in the past 20 years, all the stormwater facilities are privately maintained with maintenance agreements with the town and county? Would the town have to take over the maintenance? I don't know if there's a question that any of you can actually address at this point, but we need to look into that.
So stormwater utilities may still work. The towns do not have to take over maintenance. They could. And there is probably, you know, a structure of catch basins in the street and a series of pipes to outfalls that could use, you know, might need improvement. Stormwater utility legislation also has in there a set of incentives to do better stormwater management that is required by the state rules as a way to reduce your stormwater fee. So it's possible that it is, and you know, I will point out again, for all the development that occurred prior to the 20 years that is not getting stormwater management, there's an opportunity for the municipalities to institute practices and, you know, put in projects that will help address that.
If I could just add, Mike, in terms of Hamilton, we're not anticipating, we have some privately maintained stormwater management facilities in place, installations. We're not envisioning taking them over at all. We're looking at having this utility strictly cover the municipal system.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to get back to the question that is actually for Chris while he was away from his desk. There's a question from Mary. Our town's repaving a lot of roads and putting in curbs that drain to stormwater grates. And she keeps asking them to investigate the curb cuts, swales, etc., but nothing happens. What's the best practices for draining water from roads? Should she like to bring them out, point those out to her engineers in the Borough Council?
So, I mean, so that's a real big issue. I see that throughout my town too. They've got these beautiful roadways with curbs and catch basins, and then there's 15 to 20 feet on the side of the road that's like grassed and paved, and you could simply put a curb cut in there and treat the water right there. It'd be so easy to do it. But the problem is there's no requirement to do that, you know, and there's no incentive to do that, right? And for the most part, you know, developers and municipalities and Department of Transportations are going to continue to do the things that they've always done. You know, engineers are creatures of habit, right? We took us 20 years to figure out how to design a detention basin. They're still hanging on to that, and they don't want to let that go. So instead, they added sand to the bottom of the detention basin. They called it a sand filter, and it's the same design, you know, and it's going to infiltrate into the ground, except we forgot to dig our soil testing pits deep enough so now it fills with water and never drains, you know. But it's what we know how to do, so we don't really want to do anything different, learn anything different. So I think what's going to have to happen in a situation like that is you need to find one spot where you can do it and do a demonstration project and show what it would look like. The big complaint you're going to pushback you're going to get back is that those need maintenance, as if everything else we build in the world doesn't need maintenance. Only rain gardens require maintenance, right? So yes, they need maintenance. They're going to need to be maintained. They're going to need to be weeded. They need to be if you want, depending on how you want it to look, you know, you're going to have to take care of it a certain way, you know, just like anything else. So just like those catch basins, you got to clean out. Those catch basins weren't there, you wouldn't have to have a guy clean those out every time, right? It would go into the rain garden, right? There would be no catch basin cleaning. There you go. You saved money. Wonderful. You know, and you made your town look even beautiful, right? So I don't think there's a magic way of doing this. I think there's some towns that are more progressive than others. There's been a lot of push in New Jersey for green streets or complete streets, and I don't even think there's one green street in New Jersey. There's pieces of it, but there's no green street from block to block that someone actually had gone in and put the stormwater management in and put all the complete stuff in. And I think that's a big problem, is that we need some of these examples in place that we can show. So when I give a presentation, I could show this slide, and Mike can show this slide, and Dan could show this slide, and people can say, well, where is it? And they say, well, come Saturday, we'll throw you in a bus, we'll take you there, we'll show it to you. You can talk to the guy who designs it, you can talk to the guy who maintains it, you know. Jen Coffey will buy you a drink afterwards. It'll be great, you know. So I think that's something that really kind of has to happen, is we really need to have more of these projects in place. And we're trying to do that, actually. On on Tuesday of next week, we're beginning the construction of our 50th rain garden for the year. We set a goal to build 50 rain gardens this year for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So we'll be in Woodbridge on Tuesday, breaking ground for the 50th garden. So really excited about that. But I mean, these gardens are all over the state. And matter of fact, there's one right behind you, Randy, right? And what is that? That's Woodstown, right? So there's one right there in that picture, and we were there this summer building it, and I don't know, it was like 120 degrees. Someone was asking about the heat before. I think when we built that one, it was about 120 degrees out that day. Yeah. So, but we have to have more projects in the ground. That's the issue.
I'm going to finish up with just one last question. Since we're running short of time, this is from Gary. He says, it seems that most DEP regs are written for nice wooded, pristine areas with relatively unspoiled waterways. We do a lot of work in urban areas where we're removing debris and pavement up to the bank, top of the bank, replacing it with riparian compatible vegetation, maybe putting impermeable paving walkways, reducing impervious pavement. Yet we get to, through this rigor of the DEP trying to recreate the pristine conditions that don't exist. What are the chances that of getting separate regs for redevelopment areas? I guess is the bottom line of his question.
So I think I'll take that since Chris moved away. So from a stormwater perspective, the regs for redevelopment are very different, and one would argue does not even exist. There are flood hazard requirements and maybe wetlands requirements, waterfront development requirements, and a lot of them have exceptions or general permits or permits by rule for areas that are already disturbed and developed. Sometimes, the square peg doesn't quite fit in the round hole, and you have to work with DEP. So at least from an advocate's perspective, the urban areas seem not to get as much protections as maybe they should. But also sometimes DEP's rules don't quite fit the situation.
All right, I think since we're just past 1:30 now, we're going to finish it up. I thank everybody for attending today's session. And I think it was, a lot to take in, which is I'm glad that these sessions are being recorded so that we can review them later and make sure we didn't miss anything because a lot of information was given to us. I want to, our next session is going to be this coming Thursday. It's going to be a social hour, so please join us for then.
Thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate it, Mike and Chris and Dan. Great presentation, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you for joining us
Thank you
today.
so much.
I
All
appreciate it.
right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.